Scuba goes under the sea. The podcast for the inquisitive diver.
Hey there, dive buddies, and welcome to the show. My next guest found his love for diving when he was just 16 years old, and quite simply, he's never lost it. He shares his experiences and knowledge as a course director conducting instructor development training in Queensland and the Sunshine Coast right here in Australia. Albeit, he's lived and dived all over the world. Kai Steinbeck has been actively involved in the dive industry since 1993 and joins me today as we talk about the dive industry, standards, and a few of Kai's random adventures and the glorious waters around Australia. Kai, welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing?
Thank you very much. Yeah, doing really well, thank you. And thank you for having me on. Great to be here.
I'm super excited, mate. The way that you do all your bits and pieces on Facebook and all the other stuff, it all looks super exciting. So I've been like a kid at Christmas waiting for this one to happen.
Well, I'm glad to see that some of the advertising works. It's just hard to figure out which one works. But I'm glad that you're getting the message. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, you're trying to attract people to become instructors, but you're actually attracting an instructor that wants you to come on his podcast.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I love your podcast. It's been really great listening to it. I've just done a bit of a road trip coming back from Cairns down to the Sunshine Coast and listened to the last 2 episodes on that, which, great entertainment.
Happy days. How long did the drive take you? That must have been quite some time.
Oh, look, you can do it in 2 days, but you end up like a zombie. I did it in 3 days. I went to Cairns, Townsville. I've got some friends down there. And then Townsville, Rockhampton, and then Rocky down to the Sunshine Coast. Arrived here 2:00 this afternoon, and no time to waste, and here we are.
Yeah, and you're ready to get this done and go to bed a bit knackered. Let's wind it back a little bit. I mean, we're going to say all about what you do and the amazing work you do, but I mentioned briefly that you started at 16 years old. But how did you first get into having a go at diving?
Well, I was really lucky with my childhood that when I was about 10, my parents decided to leave Germany and move to the Caribbean, to an island called the Dominican Republic. And being 10 at the time, I had no option but to follow them along. Yeah. And that's where I grew up. And my first introduction to diving was with a Canadian dive instructor. He had a little company called Dive with Dan. And he used my parents' pool. We had a small motel, and he used the pool, and that's where I started first. And then did nothing for a couple of years until there was my brother, actually, who got into diving, who's a bit older than me, and I started doing dive courses and did my actual open water course. And then just dove, no further education, just kept on diving and diving. And at the age of 16 or so, my parents decided that I should get some sort of an education and shipped me off to a boarding school in Canada. I left the Dominican Republic in December. It was 30 degrees, beautiful sunshine, nice and warm. Everybody was happy. Yeah. And arrived in Montreal. It was minus 30 degrees and everything was gray and horrible and everybody was unhappy. But on the school holidays, going backwards and forwards, I had a friend who decided to open a dive shop in Costa Rica, and I flew down there on school holidays and did most of my further training with him, like the advanced, the rescue, and then the dive master. Mm-hmm. After finishing high school in Canada and 4 years of university, as the story always goes, I met a girl. She happened to be Australian. And that's how I ended up in Australia and did my instructor course in Rockhampton with the legendary course director, Tony Fonts, who has probably certified more instructors in Australia than anyone else. Mm-hmm. He was a really, really, really inspirational person. And 1993, that was pre-internet. So went off to the Rockhampton post office, looked at the yellow pages. A dive company in Cairns had the biggest ad, and off I went and gave them a call and said, brand new dive instructor, really, really keen. They said, you and 20 other people standing outside the door. Yeah. And I said, I do speak German. And then they said, when can you start? So that was my foot into the door. Was a course instructor for them for a number of years, and then went on to working on the boats as a trip director on the boats or dive supervisor on the boats. Got my sea time, did my skipper's ticket, and then probably for the last 4 years that I worked for that company, I did all their sales and marketing. So was fortunate enough to fly around the world and promote diving at the Great Barrier Reef and the company that I worked for, as well as going to great dive shows and meeting lots of really interesting people along the way.
Yeah, it sounds like a terrible job.
Oh, horrible job. And it was so horrible that I actually did end up leaving the dive industry. No, not because it was horrible. My ex-wife, she trained racehorses as a hobby up in Cairns, and that really didn't go anywhere, and she wanted to do it professionally. So we moved down to Brisbane and left the dive industry completely and ended up on the land in agriculture, ended up managing a stock feed mill on the Sunshine Coast, manufacturing chook feed, cattle feed, all those sort of things.
It's a bit of a difference.
Yeah, very different. But it was really interesting for me because it gave me lots of experience outside of the diving industry, which I was able to now apply into my own business. And then about 4 years ago, I was made redundant, and my old boss from the original dive school that I worked for, he started up an operation in Port Douglas and built a brand new boat, which he brought into the marketplace. And we were talking, and I didn't have a job, and I could move to Port Douglas and work in the dive industry, so it wasn't really a hard decision to make. Off I went and moved to beautiful Port Douglas and managed the dive operation there, which was great. Hiring brand new set of staff, and working with some of the existing crew from Cairns that came up and gave us a hand.
This is Divers Den, right?
This is Divers Den, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
and it's 4 years ago.
That's right, yeah. So the boat that we moved into Port Douglas was called Aqua Quest.
Yeah. You must know Luke Murphy then.
Of course I know Luke Murphy, yes. Shall we do an entire segment on Luke Murphy?
Oh, no. Was it the Aqua Quest boat that he did did like a little music rendition as a pirate, gangster, rapper kind of thing?
That is its sister ship called Reef Quest.
Yeah.
That's where the briefing video came from, which is available on YouTube. If you Google Divers Den or Reef Quest safety video, it is quite a video.
Mate, I'm going to put it in the show notes. It just makes me laugh all the time. He's an absolute legend, that boy.
Yeah, and the entire cast of that particular safety video are not professional actors. They are just all crew that love their jobs, and that's what's so great about the dive industry. Yeah.
Well, I used to work with Luke in Thailand. He came and did his instructor training at the dive centre I was working at, and I taught his other half, Jo.
Yes,
I did her advanced training.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then she went on to do her DM with us. Yeah, it was a very small world.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great about the dive industry, like it's amazing how many contacts there are. And I mean, even the way you and I met, we've never actually met in person, but I was on planning a trip to Komodo before coronavirus and, put out in a Facebook dive group a post, recommendations, and you popped up, obviously, because of your previous business that you were running that before coronavirus, your business of taking groups all over the world. So there we go.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the dive industry. I love the way it networks and it works together. If you spend a couple of years in it as a dive pro, then if you don't know the person directly, you're going to know someone that's worked with that person you're talking about. It's so small, but at the same time, it just covers the entire globe. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. I'm pretty sure that I could couch surf the world for the next 2 or 3 years once the borders open again.
Yeah, me both, mate. Yeah, take a bag with me, regs in, and I'm away.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now you've moved from Cairns and you've come down to the sunny coast.
Yep.
And you're going to base there for a while now?
Yeah, unfortunately, due to COVID, Cairns and Port Douglas is really suffering, and shout out to all Australians, if you can, spend your holidays, spend them in Australia, go travel, see your own backyard. Unfortunately, Cairns and Port Douglas doesn't have a big metropolitan city attached to it where it can draw customers out of, and that international travel really was the base for all their customers. Yeah. And at the moment, it's, school holidays, very, very busy. In between, very, very quiet.
Yeah, and I think people are still scared about crossing the borders, aren't they? There's a lot of apprehension.
Of course there is. What happens if, something happens and they shut even a domestic border again? Can you get back in? Do you have to quarantine? All those sort of things, for sure. But so I have my own company called Dive Instructor Academy, and I did my course director's course about 3 years ago, and I'm now down on the Sunshine Coast working with Sunreef down here, and teaching instructor courses, which we did our first program a couple of weeks ago, and our next one is at the end of April. It's all going really, really well, and I'm really, really excited. I mean, we start our instructor development program not in a classroom. We go diving on the HMAS Brisbane on the first day, which is just, how cool is that? Starting off your IDC with the dive on the wreck.
And I was like, it's a nightmare way to start a course, eh? Here's some amazing diving. Now you can sit in the classroom for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Exactly. So,
and so. Where are your candidates coming from? Are they coming from all over Australia, or are you finding it's more within the local vicinity?
The first program that we ran, it was local. I think there was, let me think now, there was 3 from the Sunshine Coast, one from who worked at Tangalooma, and one girl that worked on the Gold Coast. And on this next program, there's a lady from South Australia flying up. There is a lady from, where's Jetty Dive? Down there.
Oh, that's down south as well, isn't it?
That's down south in New South Wales.
New South Wales, yeah.
New South Wales, yeah. So she's coming up from there. And then there's about 3 or 4 candidates from Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. So, Australia white. We haven't had anybody from WA yet, maybe a bit far, but for sure, it's a great location, and it's beautiful, and
Mate, with your enthusiasm, it won't be long until you've got people knocking at the door and you can't take them. They'll be queuing up.
Well, that's a horrible problem to have.
Yeah, I know. Hey, one thing I did want to ask about on a slightly more serious note, because you're a course director and all that. Last week's episode, you heard it yourself. I was speaking to Gareth Locke, and I'd be keen to hear what your opinion would be on. I know it's very difficult because of what human factors is and what a PADI instructor development course is, but do you think there is room for human factors within an IDC?
There is always room for extra training and adding extra things into the curriculum, for sure. And as course directors, we have a curriculum to follow, and we have to do certain things in order to make sure that, according to the educational system the training agency puts out, we have ticked all the boxes. Some programs are 7 days, some programs are 10 days, some programs are longer. I run a 12-day program, so you can add other things into the programs in order to make it a better thing, and you can do that within the guidelines of the curriculum that the training agency provides you with. You just elaborate and go further to elaborate further to whatever you want to include it. But yeah, for sure, I believe that it's our responsibility just not to just churn out instructors, but to bring people into the industry with the best possible knowledge in order to create great divers. Listening to the podcast last week that was put out, I believe that. There's a really fine balance of, at the end of the day, this is a great industry to be in, but at the end of the day, I still have to buy groceries and pay rent.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, you have open water courses which are done in 3 days, and they tick the boxes, and you've got your open water certification. And I remember vividly hearing, you know, that you are trained to the conditions in which you are trained in. So if you've learned to dive, for example, you know, somewhere on the Great Barrier Reef with 20-meter visibility, and it happened to be a beautiful, calm weekend when you did all your training, and then all of a sudden you go to, say, diving somewhere else along the coast, whether it be the Yongala or here the HMAS Brisbane or in New South Wales or in Victoria, where conditions are vastly different. That's where us as instructors have that responsibility really to instill into their students that if you're not trained in that particular environment, get an orientation dive with somebody, you know, get the experience in order to dive that area safely.
Yeah.
We get regularly clients on the dive boats out of Cairns and Port Douglas who, you know, come up and they haven't dived in 5 or 6 years, and that's when they did their open water course, and they come on and want to go diving, you know, without having done that refresher course. And it's such a vital and important thing for certified divers to understand that, yeah, I've done my training, but if I haven't dived in 5 years, then I shouldn't just jump on a boat and go for a dive. I should probably do the refresher just like we tell you to in that training initially. I mean, if you're comparing it to somebody who learns to drive a car, my daughter is about to go for her driver's license. God help us. But, you know, it's the same thing there. If you have somebody who's just learned to drive a car and then doesn't drive a car for 3 years, you know, putting them behind a wheel, being allowed to drive 100 kilometers down the road is going to be a very risky activity. Yeah. And anybody who's saying that diving is not a risky activity is not really portraying the truth. It is risky, but it is safe as long as we follow the guidelines that we've put in place from the training agencies where you've learned to dive with.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But I also think that there should be more emphasis right from the word go on safety and repetition. And the thing I like about having done a few IDCs and ITs, IEs over the years, I like the repetition. I think repetition is something that creates the element to be able to respond straight away without having to think about it. And that, as a diver, is paramount.
For sure, absolutely. And you know, I myself, and I certainly encourage any instructor that when you certify that open water student, you know, to encourage them, go diving, get that experience. You've done 4 training dives with me, basically guiding you and making sure that you're okay. You know, your first dive by yourself with another buddy is going to be, you know, you're responsible for everything, all the planning. You know, you have this license which allows you to jump in the water off the beach, rent a tank and go diving. But it's important that you do follow all the procedures and get that experience in order to become responsible and become proficient in the diving industry.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even proficiency for the diving industry. It's the safety of the individual, isn't it? I just it grates me when I get on a boat or I'll go diving somewhere and you just see like the blasé kind of attitude and the lack of knowledge, and then you get under the water and everybody's got a camera nowadays, so it gets even worse. And I know there's not a lot that the training agencies can do to enforce making repetition of skills, you know, a requirement. But I think there's a lot more that can be done right at the base level, right from the word go, on the emphasis, and then it's re-emphasised on every course that's achieved. And that way, that becomes second nature in itself, that people have it in their head that they've got to do something that's a repetition, that's something that is going to keep that safety there and get rid of this ridiculous notion of people jumping in. I'm going off on a bit of a rant here, but I had two good friends contact me maybe 30 minutes before we jumped online, and they're living in Bali, which is clearly torture for them right now. But they're like, we've just been offered a ridiculous price to go on a boat in Raja Ampat for 11 days and 4 dives a day. Do you think it's a good thing we should do? I said, yeah, it's a great place to go. But have you learned to dive yet? No. Okay, so you might need to get your license first and then maybe not think about Raja Ampat because it might be a little bit difficult for your skills. Thankfully, I'll put them in touch with Jace over on Nusa Penida. Go and do your course and do some fun diving, get some repetition, get some skills, get some safety behind you before you go and challenge something like Raja Ampat. But yeah, there you go. I'm going off on a tangent again, but there we go. We'll come back in now.
No, but look, I understand what you're saying. I think, and I think it's the whole adventure industry, and scuba diving is part of that adventure industry, has made it incredibly easy for someone to, do a dive course and go diving in some incredible, amazing places, And then I think it boils down to the dive operators themselves, because once the customer is certified, the training agency really has no overarching control over somebody who's just going on a fun dive. And that's where it then comes down to the operators to run a very safe operation and looking at their clientele and saying, all right, these people are really, really confident and comfortable and competent, and versus these guys are not, and they're going to be the ones that I'm really going to have to look out for. I was working for another company up in Port Douglas that, if you go diving with them, it doesn't matter who you are, you have to go guided, no ifs, no buts. Their sister company would have staff that come up and they would be instructors teaching with their sister company. They would not be allowed to go unguided. That's just a blanket rule they have. So a lot of it comes then back to the operators to ensure that safety is followed. And I think that's where in Australia we are so incredibly lucky that we have, an overarching code of conduct that ensures that we operate safely. It does make things more expensive because on the boats you need a safety surface watch, et cetera, but it makes diving, certainly in Australia, an incredibly safe activity afterwards.
I kind of agree and I kind of disagree as well.
Yeah.
Because I feel for the operators because they're the ones that are stuck in the middle. So they're trying to create a reasonable price that people are willing to pay to go on their boats. But at the same time, that price is that low that they're having to put more people on the boat. Therefore, the boats are getting pretty damn crammed. And the dive guide to customer ratio tends to be pretty big.
Yeah, it's usually 8 to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no way. I mean, I'm a pretty good instructor. I like to believe I am. And you clearly are as well, but there's no way on God's green earth are we going to be able to control 8 divers in the water at once and provide a good level of customer care.
Yep, you're correct with that.
Yeah.
There is, and you see it. It just really comes down to the makeup of the group that you end up with as an instructor on that day that you're guiding around as a certified dive guide. I look, I don't know what the answer is. I think you're right. There should be more emphasis in the training side of things on ensuring that putting some of that responsibility back onto the actual students to ensure that, if I haven't dived in that environment, I get some training in that environment. Or if I haven't dived in, 2 years, 12 months, 6 months, whatever it is, depending on your comfort level. I mean, look, if I haven't dived in 12 months, do I need to do a refresher course? No. Somebody who hasn't dived in 12 months, who's just done their open water course, for sure should do a refresher course.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I mean, it just needs to change a lot at the bottom, I think. And, I've been responsible for it in the past, and, you sell and, hey, do 4 days with us, 3 days with us. You get 4 dives, and you can dive anywhere in the world. Boom. And well, I'm not going to labour the point, but yeah, we need to try and find some changes somehow to make it work. And I don't know whether that's to do it locally. And like you say, the agencies themselves, they can't be responsible for it, because once they're once the people are post training, then they're not really the responsibility of the training agency anymore, are they?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like learning how to drive a car. The driving instructor teaches your son or your daughter how to drive a car, but it's not once they have done and deemed them competent enough to go and pass their driver's test.
Yeah.
It's not really back to them.
Ciao.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, just getting onto a bit of a lighter note. Tell me about your little trip. I mean, to give everyone who's listening, I got kind of engrossed in this thing where I'll let Kai tell the story, but going from point A to point B and back again, and the adventures along the way. I need to hear it from you firsthand, dude.
Yeah, well, the little trip is probably the one you're referring to when I decided to go to Mexico in the middle of a pandemic chasing a job.
That's the one.
Yeah, okay. So it all actually started in about October or November 2019. I saw an advert on a Facebook page looking for a course director in Mexico who is able to speak German and Spanish. And I thought, oh, gee, that sounds like me. I am German. I speak German. Growing up in the Dominican Republic, I'm fluent in Spanish. And look, I didn't really put much effort into it. I just sent my resume off and never heard from them. COVID came along. Everything was shut down. And in about August 2020, that company contacted me and was wondering whether or not I'd still be interested in the job. And being up in Cairns and Port Douglas and things had really quietened down, I thought to myself, well, even if you give this a go for 6 months or 12 months, what could the worst be? And I said, yeah, I'm sure I'm interested. So we came to an agreement, and then the first hurdle was as well, how do I even get out of Australia? Because you're not allowed to leave Australia. So I applied to the government, and because I had a job offer and I was planning on leaving for a significant time, I got permission to leave the country. So that was the first tick. Then I thought to myself, well, how do you get to Mexico in the middle of a pandemic? And went to your
little rowboat out.
Went to your local travel agent, and he sort of laughed at me when I told him I want to go to Mexico. And then 5 minutes later, he said, I don't understand why this is so easy. There's a direct flight from Cairns to Sydney, and then Sydney, San Francisco, and San Francisco, Cancun, and these flights operate every single day. I said, okay. And it wasn't too expensive either. So, I decided to quit my middle management job in a very prominent dive operation in Port Douglas and, sacrifice my JobKeeper payment and sell my worldly possessions and at the age of 49, was able to cram everything that I own in 3 suitcases. One of them was dive gear, another bag was my camera gear, and one bag was clothes. So, and off I went to Mexico. And look, Mexico, it was a real eye-opener for me. Obviously, of course, I was conscious of the fact that, coronavirus is far more advanced or rampant over there than what it is in Australia. But I didn't realize to what extent it would affect me personally. I have no problems wearing a mask, but having to wear that mask constantly, being in a restaurant and wondering whether or not the cook has COVID and whether you're not going to get sick of eating this meal. Well, long story short, I realized that, I have 2 daughters who were very, very keen for me to move to Mexico so that they could come and visit and go diving in some of these amazing places. But realizing, too, that, they probably can't come and visit for another 12 months, 2 years, quite potentially. And the economic situation down there was not as good as what I had believed it would be. The being hit in the face with coronavirus, and trying to adapt. And I think because people have become accustomed to it in America or in Mexico or in Europe, that they're dealing it probably very differently to me, who's just arrived from Australia, where we live like nothing's happening. So I very quickly realized that I should, if I can, move back to Australia. And I was dealing a little bit with, panic and anxiety and thinking, my God, what have you done? So I looked and there were 3 flights left. There was one tomorrow, the next day, and the day after. And the company who employed me, I have to say they were nothing but brilliant. They really understood and accepted the fact that this was a bad decision on my behalf, and they were incredible and helped me out. So somehow, and I hope I'm not going to get hate mail from 40,000 Australians who are trying to return to Australia and can't because flights get cancelled. I somehow lucked out. I booked a flight online from Mexico, and I was never bumped. And I flew from Mexico to Washington, San Francisco to back to Sydney, and I really feel for everybody who's out there trying to get back home. The situations that you're in, and I have to say I was just lucky that I managed to do it.
It's probably easier to get you on a flight as well because you're just one man as opposed to a couple or a family.
Potentially, yes. Potentially that is the case as well. Yes. So. And then the fun really started because I'm in quarantine, and after you check in, and I remember we were in a 5-star hotel, and upon check-in they said to us, "Would you like to upgrade to a room with a balcony?" And I thought, "Oh yeah, that would be quite nice because I'm going to be in for 2 weeks." And they said, "Well, that's an extra $300." I said, "Okay, well, $300 for 2 weeks, that's all right." No, that's $300 a night.
Get out of it.
Extra for the upgrade for a room with a balcony. Otherwise, your window does not open. I said, well, no, that's more than the quarantine itself. And I am a dive instructor, so we all know what the wages are. And so I decided against that. And then you, on the first day, you get a coronavirus test where they shove something up your nose and tickle your brain. Mm-hmm. And a couple of days later, I was starting not to feel all that great, and I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't not very good. And of course the test came back positive. So here I am after having returned from being in Mexico for 5 days, and I was so careful. I was so incredibly careful. I have no idea how I caught it, but I ended up positive.
You were only there for the 5 days?
I was in Mexico for 5 days, yes. So
you're lucky to get a flight, but you shit out of luck when it comes to catching the disease, eh?
Yeah, and I think maybe, look, the flights to and from Australia, there was maybe 40 people on the flight, so I don't think I got it there. But the internal flights, Mexico, throughout America, throughout the US, they were full, and I'd suggest possibly there. I really don't know. I've tried to figure it out, but no idea. And and then I had all sorts of really horrible thoughts about, what's going to happen to me, and, ventilators and what you sort of see on the media, and it was really frightening. And so then they move you from the hotel that you checked in to what they call the hospital hotel, and that's where all the positive cases are. And lucky in the positive in the hospital hotel that it was an apartment hotel, and it did actually have a balcony, so I never had to pay the upgrade. I got the balcony for free, but the cost was coronavirus. And there was a couple of people who I'd love to give a shout out who were really instrumental in me getting through this, and one of them is Bridget Yeager, who used to work for PADI. She was talking to her and telling her how horrible the food was. And she was a gem. She lives in Sydney. She made me home-cooked meals and dropped them off at reception for me. And, legendary. Absolutely. Bridget, thank you. And the other person is Dr. Kathy Meehan. She is a dive doctor from Cairns and has been my doctor for as long as I remember. And she was, of course, very excited to have a diver who is positive. So, she can find out what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And she called me every single day, and also just for my mental stability and mental health, got me through this. And so really much so, shout out for those two amazing individuals getting me through this. But the interesting thing was that I said to New South Wales Health, okay, so when are we doing my next test? And they said, well, no, there is no more tests. And I said, but how does this work? I need a test, a negative test, to get back into Queensland. And they said, well, no, because once you're positive, we don't test you anymore. After 14 days, if you don't show any signs or symptoms for 3 days after those 14 days, we let you go.
Without a test?
Without a test. And I said, but I need a test. And they said, well, we don't give you a test. Anyways, we're backwards and forwards. Eventually, they said, the reason we don't give you another test is because you can test positive for up to 6 or 8 weeks later.
Right.
You're no longer contagious, but you're still positive. You will still return a positive test.
And how do they know that you're not contagious then?
Look, I'm a dive instructor, not a doctor.
Yeah.
Somehow it's the incubation period after 14 days. 3 days later, if no signs and symptoms, you're no longer contagious.
Okay.
That's what they tell me. And they said, well, and the other thing is, if we do give you a test and you do turn positive, we don't really know if we can release you or not. So anyway, in my most I am German diplomatic way that I can possibly be with another government authority. We argued backwards and forwards, and they did end up giving me another test. That was after 3 weeks in quarantine. They did give me another test, and that test became negative.
Okay.
And I thought, hallelujah, great. Because the rules were, if you have a negative test, you can drive to the airport in special transport, hop on a plane, fly to Brisbane. But of course, with my luck, that's the day that Queensland Health changed the rules. Mm-hmm. And so if you were positive and tested negative, now you needed to wait another 2 weeks and give them another negative test before being able to enter Queensland. It's like, oh, my God. So, I ended up, I said, well, I checked out of my beautiful apartment hotel in Sydney and bought myself a car. A friend of mine had an old car for sale that he wanted to get rid of, and it was a $2,000 little investment, which was great. It didn't last all the way, so that's a whole nother story for another episode. But I basically drove up to the border, took my time, called in, of course, as you do, every single dive shop along the way. Yep. And I think that's the Facebook following that you did, and saw where I was and all the amazing places. and what was amazing was that all the dive shops along the way were incredibly busy. I remember being at Fish Rock, and they said, if you want to go diving with us, there's a 2-week waiting list. Oh. So this is amazing, Yeah. So it was so great to see that the dive industry that was capable of drawing out clients from the larger metropolitan cities were actually really, really busy. And speaking to one of the training agency, well, the one I'm affiliated with, they saying that they've had not a drop, but actually a rise in certifications, which is great to see, because Australians are diving at home and doing courses at home, which is brilliant. Yeah. So then decided after 2 weeks, another test, crossed the border, and had all my paperwork in place, and I was really disappointed when the police officer just waved me through, didn't even look at anything. And on my way, stopped again at dive shops along the Brisbane and Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast and Harvey Bay, and had another meeting with the guys at Sunreef, and that's really when the relationship developed of doing instructor courses up there, because there was no one doing them on the Sunshine Coast as such. But further on to coronavirus and diving, of course, the next thing I had to do was a dive medical. Yeah, and again, a bit apprehensive about the whole thing, because I felt perfectly fine. The first day there was a tightening in the chest, and but other than that, it just felt as if you had a bit of a chest cold, and if it wasn't for a pandemic, you'd go to work. Having said that, when I was in quarantine, lying on the couch watching TV and with nothing else to do but lie there, resting heart rate was up to 145 beats per minute.
145?
145 beats per minute lying on the couch. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, there's finite number of heartbeats this thing has. Slow down.
You shaved a few minutes off the back end.
Yeah, exactly. By the time I got released, we were down to probably about 80 to 90 beats per minute, and now it's perfectly normal.
And was this high heart rate, was it like consistent or was it fluctuating?
No, it was consistent. That's what it was.
Wow.
That's what it was. Yeah, and I didn't even feel it. Like when you're running or exercising, you can feel your heartbeat. I wasn't aware of it until they come and see you twice a day and check your blood pressure and heart rate. And that's how I was aware of it. So yeah.
Bloody hell.
And then so Dive Medical, lung X-rays came back completely clean. I was like, oh, Thank you. Somebody's watching over me finally. But interestingly enough, and anybody who's done a professional dive medical before knows what a spirometry test is. It's basically like a hairdryer you blow into that measures how much you can actually exhale. And my results all my life were very, very constant, and this time around it was actually 7% less than last year. Okay. So there is certainly some damage, and whether or not that is going to now be the way it is for the rest of my diving career, or I am healthy, I don't smoke, I do exercise every so often, whether or not that is going to repair itself, well, we'll find out. The interesting thing of all that is that the average person doesn't have that benchmark test of a spirometry, and if they catch coronavirus, they probably go and do a dive medical as such, and wouldn't realize that there was some underlying damage potentially done. So
yeah.
I am very, very glad that we have the very strict restrictions we have in this country, and certainly our industry, the tourism industry, the dive industry, has suffered tremendously in it. But look at how we live. We walk around as if nothing happens. We walk around in shopping centers. Most of us have jobs and can go to work. And it really doesn't affect us so much in comparison to people in the States, in Europe, and the rest of the world. I think we are very, very lucky the way it's been handled over here. I
think it's down to the Australian people, the population.
Oh, for sure.
When the government, it's as much of a pain in the arse it's been, when the government has said, masks on buses and trains, or stay at home, you've got a lockdown, social distance. People have done it. Quite simply, they've just done it. And it's worked. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Without going down the rabbit hole of the existence of coronavirus, all that kind of thing.
And if 5G is actually causing it, and tinfoil hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So just going back to your stint with the coronavirus. So you how long did you feel as though you were suffering from a cold or flu-like symptoms? How long did it, until you thought, right, I'm good to go?
It was a good two weeks. It was a good full 2 weeks. Yeah. And I never got any of the symptoms that you hear of loss of taste and loss of smell. Maybe because the food was so bad in the quarantine hotel, I'm not sure. But there are Facebook groups specifically for people in quarantine. And you know what we did on those Facebook groups all day long is we compared what we got fed and took photos of it and showed each other. But the first 2 days I didn't feel very, very good at all, and after that it was a chest cold. Never had a fever, never lost taste or smell, and but yeah, it lingered around for a good 2 weeks, and other than the high heart rate and what it does to your head, being locked away in a room, you can't go anywhere, was tough. It was really tough doing quarantine for 3 weeks. but in the big scheme of things, certainly worth it in order to be able to live the way we live. Yeah.
Happy days. Well, I'm glad you're over it, Chief.
Oh, and so am I. I'm glad that there's other people, obviously who I was talking to my doctor, and she knows of somebody who is similar age to me who lives in America. He was very much into tech diving, and he ended up in a respirator and can never dive again, and has to, swallow 6 pills every day for the rest of his life.
Really?
So. Yeah, I was very, very lucky with regards to being able to come back to Australia, and even though I've got coronavirus, that I'm healthy and all is good.
Yeah.
Imagine never being able to dive again.
Oh, that's up there as one of my worst fears.
Yeah, for sure.
For
sure.
There's an old boy actually. Whenever we get on this kind of subject, I always think of him. His name's Smoothie. And he is a smoothie when the women are around. But he's what, 80, 85? Maybe 86. But he goes back to Thailand every year just to get a tick in the box to say that he can continue teaching the kids in the pools back in the UK. He's been diving 59 years, I think it is, 30-odd years as a police diver. But now that he's of the old age, he just sits in the pool and teaches basic skills for the kids. But he has to get certified. And every year, I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago when I was out there, every year he'd come back and, this is definitely my last year. I can't do it anymore. I'm getting too old. But I'm going to miss it. And sure enough, 364 days later, Smoothie will rock up on the rock and, just one more year.
Just one more year, yeah, for sure. And it's because it is such a great industry, and certainly for somebody like that, being able to continue to do it, which, the whole experience has, created havoc, obviously, in the dive industry in Australia with jobs and so on and so forth. But, it's great to see that domestically, the smaller operators that are attached to a larger metropolitan city are actually doing really, really well, and there are jobs in the dive industry available. I have just gotten 2 candidates who did their IDC with me last year, a job on an island off the coast of Queensland. They're working off there, and all the people on the last instructor course that I did at Sunreef have either come from positions where they were dive masters and working at dive masters and upskilled themselves to instructors so that they can, be more employable and useful to that particular dive center. And there are jobs around. It's not like what it used to be, and it's certainly Southeast Asia and the rest of the world is really suffering because there are no jobs there. But certainly in Australia, if you go away from those major tourist hubs such as Cairns and Port, and look for work as a dive instructor, if you look, you can find employment for sure.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. I think it's a great time to do the training, especially if you're thinking about stepping up and becoming an instructor, because, years ago when I did it, there was a gazillion instructors. So you're always fighting for the jobs and trying to prove yourself. But the way the world is at the moment, everybody's just waiting for the doors to open. And I think there's going to be a mass exodus from all the countries to all the other countries, just because people want the freedom to be able to travel again. So there's going to be, all of a sudden, a lot of people rocking up at resorts that want to go diving.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that. It's tourism will open up again internationally when that is, and there's all sorts of things about the vaccine and how that is going to open the doors, and I hope it does. And and it might be another 12 months time, but I agree with you. I think if you want to be in this industry, and whether you are an open water diver today and you're thinking, I might want to become an instructor one day, start doing your courses now. Do your advanced course, do your rescue course, because the more training you have, the better you will be employed or the easier it will be for you to become employed further down the track. And then when you get down to the professional levels, dive master course, if you've always thought about it, heck, if you have, whether can you do it part-time or full-time, take time off. If you're not working, talk to your local dive centers. They might put in a payment plan for you, and the same thing for the instructor course. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And anyone who's considering doing the IDC can clearly hit you up and you can sort them out with a cheeky little trip up to the sunny coast. Absolutely.
So, we would love to. We're running 5 instructor development courses per year now as a minimum on the Sunshine Coast. The next one starts at the end of April. And look, without making this a commercial about myself, please, by all means, hit me up, diveinstructor.com.au. Very easy website to remember, diveinstructor.com.au. Send me an email. And whether you're a dive master looking at becoming an instructor, whether you're certified as open water and have nothing and you want to know what is the path to get there, or whether you're already a dive instructor and looking at, master scuba diver trainer rating or staff instructor rating, so on and so forth. Yeah, please. Would love to help you out and be in touch with you.
And what's the long range goals for the Dive Instructor Academy?
The long range goals is I would love to see certainly Cairns and Port Douglas come back up and being able to operate a couple of instructor development courses out of there as well. I think that will take some time, but I would love to see, working with the guys at Sunreef to make it one of the premier destinations to do your instructor course. We do include other aspects, or, we were talking about, further training and not just ticking the boxes. I include lots of other things in the instructor development course that are outside of the PADI curriculum, and they don't have anything to do with the instructor development course, but I think they're really, really great, really great knowledge for you to become more employable. One of the things I worked with a marine biologist, and we put a marine life knowledge course together, which is 14 modules, everything from, how coral is formed, what is coral, different keystone species of aquatic and underwater environments and animals, and covers a plethora of knowledge, because one of the things that unfortunately is lacking is marine life knowledge throughout the training agencies, certainly that I'm familiar with.
Definitely.
If you didn't do fish ID in your advanced course, you can go all the way to course director and never really gain any knowledge through the training agencies about marine life. And here you are now an instructor. The instructor is somebody who needs to have that knowledge. Somebody comes along and asks you a question: what is this? What is that? How does that work? Or how does coral work? What is coral? What is bleaching? What's happening? They need to have a baseline understanding. So we include that. I also include other aspects of the industry, such as we go over, for example, how to price a dive course, how to, what a margin is, what discounts do to you.
You're actually giving them a bit of business acumen as well as the social and professional skills required to do the job they're going to do. Exactly.
I hope that the candidates that graduate from Dive Instructor Academy come out and they are very, very well trained, not just in, what they have to do in order to be able to teach scuba diving, but also have some business knowledge, marine life knowledge. We're in the midst of developing a dive center management course, which will cover simple things. I'm not talking about how to take a compressor apart and service it and build it back together again, but how to change a filter in a compressor. The fact that there is silica and charcoal in there and some filters, most people have never seen that. So we aim to include real life knowledge for what they're going to require for on the job, so that when these candidates go to their first job as a dive instructor, the dive operator doesn't have to spend so much more time in training them up.
And let's be fair, I think back to when I was DMing an instructor, you kind of don't really realise at the start how much other stuff you're going to be doing.
Oh, for sure.
If you're not a team player, get out.
Exactly. And the industry itself has changed so much from way back when you did your instructor course and I did mine. I mean, we're showing our age maybe now, but let's not talk about that. But social media, I encourage all my candidates to have their private social media and then put together a dive social media platform, whether it is Instagram or Facebook, so that they, have continuous contact with their students and the students can come back to them and that relationship follows. It's just stuff that it's all common sense and it's not hard to do, but somebody needs to tell these candidates and show them, hey, this is a great idea. You don't have to do it, but, I just try to teach more than the bare minimums. Yeah.
No, 100% behind you on that one as well. I'm still in touch with guys that are, I taught them their open water 8 years ago. And, they still come diving with me year after year, apart from Corona year.
Yeah. Well, talking about diving together, you should definitely come up to the Sunshine Coast. I understand you're up here every so often, and we'll dive to Brisbane together.
Oh, mate, that'd be fantastic. That will be fantastic. I've not dived anywhere near Brisbane yet. I've only done New South Wales.
There is some incredible diving up here. There's Stradbroke Island. There's there's mantis all around there, and then of course the Brisbane, and then further north they sunk a wreck a couple of years ago of Harvey Bay, the HMS Tobruk. There's Wolf Rock. There's there's really good diving here. Absolutely.
I've got a mate actually. Shout out to Jai Kennedy over on North Stradbroke Island. He's an absolute freaking legend. This guy. If you get the opportunity to pop over and go diving with him, you can't forget his name. It's very similar to yours.
Yeah.
Giant Kai.
Yeah, for sure.
But the pictures that he's showing at the moment, and another mate's just been there diving with him, Stevie Larder. Some great manta shots. So I'm gagging to get up there and dive it. I really am. So as soon as the next business trip occurs up to Brisbane, I'm going to be knocking on your door, Chief.
No, that sounds great. That sounds great. A little plug, if anybody is looking at doing the Dive Master course or the instructor course with us through Sunreef, if they mention Scuba Goat, they have to mention Scuba Goat. Then they'll get $100 voucher that they can spend on anything in the shop. Whether it's if you need a bit of dive gear or you can put it through to something.
Happy days.
So, but they need to mention Scuba Goat.
All right. So get in touch with you or Sunreef and quote Scuba Goat.
Yep.
Get your course booked and get your voucher, $100.
That's it.
That's a nice little sweetener.
Yeah, for sure. And that's for the Dive Master and instructor programs. Yeah.
And so I've got to ask. You did tell me the other day that you've sent in something in the post, and the postman's failed. He's not turned up.
Oh, that's such a shame. I was hoping that the postman would be there by now. So, one of my sideline businesses is I make custom-made and personalized mask straps. And I was cheeky enough to get onto the Scuba Goat website and steal your logo and get it digitized. And in the mail is a really cool-looking mask strap with the Scuba Goat logo coming your way. And, that's something that I do. And you can have your own design or you choose one of ours and have your own personalized name on it. I did one. It was a married couple and they had two nudie branks. They had a nudie brank each on the mask tamer. And then one said just and the other one said married.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if they actually thought this through, because if they're diving where it says just and the other one says married, whereas if they swap sides, it will say married just. But that's on the website, diveinstructor.com.au. Go to the shop. Yeah, you can have a look on there.
I'm excited to see this. I bet it turns up in the post tomorrow morning.
Of course it is. It's called Murphy's Law. Yeah.
Okay, so a mask strap with a Scuba Goat logo on it. Happy days. Thank you very much, sir.
That's it. No, that's my pleasure. Thank you.
And if it looks slightly good, then maybe we need to have a little cheeky chat and maybe put them up on the Scuba Goat website and, get some freebies on the go and people can purchase a few as well. We get some goat masks out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Get the scuba goat masks out there and create your own little scuba goat tribe.
Hell yeah. I like the way you're thinking, Kai.
Yes.
We're going to go far.
Well, somebody has to pay for the sound engineer in the background who's being very quiet.
Oh, yeah, he's very good. But as soon as we stop recording, he'll just stop. He won't stop talking. He's got to catch up on an hour. Okay, mate. Well, I think we'll wrap it up in a mo. Just so anyone who's listening and still listening now, next week I do have, I don't know whether you know her actually, Kai, a young lady called Kirsten Shepherd, or Shep, and she's one of the owners at Ningaloo Dive. So we're going to be talking all about the beautiful Ningaloo Reef and a new liveaboard that they're bringing in as well.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I've never had the opportunity to go over there, but I have some friends who've been there on vacation, or a couple who've worked over there as well. And it's certainly from what I've seen, it looks spectacular.
Yeah. Hey, and you're more than welcome to join me, but I'm determined as soon as that WA border opens and we're comfortable to move between the two, I'm going to plan a trip to Ningaloo. And if it's going to be timing in with this new boat coming in, I'm going to try and fill the bloody thing up just with awesome people, get some awesome times on Ningaloo.
Oh, that'd be awesome, because that was your business prior to COVID, wasn't it? You were arranging trips to all over the world, doing some incredible stuff.
Yeah, my fiance nearly divorced me before we even got married. I was away that much.
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to touch that one.
All right, mate. I assume that everyone can find you on Twitter. I certainly know that they can find you on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Yeah, IDC with Kai. Type that into Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Google IDC with Kai, or the actual website is diveinstructor.com.au. Look, even if you are not planning on doing anything, if you have any questions about the dive industry, what is the job market like? How do I get from being recently certified to the first professional level? Any questions at all, please. Yeah, more than happy to answer anything.
Good on you. Good on you. So there you go, folks. You know who to go to. IDC with Kai. Kai, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And we'll do it again sometime, eh? No,
that sounds brilliant. And thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Bit nervous when we first started talking about it, but hey, it was fairly easy and painless.
Happy days. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
This is Scuba Goat Under the Sea, the podcast for the inquisitive diver.